Hi guys, welcome back to a new video. Today I'm going to go over something kind of complicated, but it will help you in not having to memorize words. So we're going to start with what's called episodic anchoring, which is just big words to say that you're matching an image or an experience with a new word that you're learning. So what I like to give as an example, well, first I can give you an example of what we've already gone over in the channel. So when I was learning tronco d'albero, because I'm learning Italian, I said I was always going to remember tronco d'albero because it's right next to Dumbledore, and I was teaching you, English with this image. So I'm never gonna forget that. And so what happens though is, so I'll give you a better example. The example I always use is when I learned the word abuela, like cuando aprendí la palabra abuela en español, I didn't think of my grandma, right? Like it wasn't my grandma that I learned because I wouldn't call my grandma abuela because she only speaks English. So what I did is I actually learned the word abuela and I associated it with my friend's grandma because that's the first abuela that I met, right? Because abuela is a separate word from grandma, even though we have to translate it in our head. But what you're really doing is, yeah, you're translating in your head if you're doing that. But a way to not translate in your head and a way to not have to memorize words is, let's say I meet abuela, right? And so that's one singular word, and it reminds me of my friend's grandmother, right? So what I need to do now is, it's okay to leave my friend's grandmother's image in my head, that's fine. But what I need to do now is I need to zoom out, right? Like, what does abuela mean? And what does the feeling of having a grandmother mean? What does it feel like when I think of the word grandma in my own language, right? So a lot of the time, especially with abuela, even more so with abuela, I think part of the culture is, like, you think of a loving grandma, like making food with love, or, things like that, or like sewing. Oh yeah, it's a big one, right? Knitting or sewing something for you with love. So that's the type of, like, that's what's called episodic anchoring, right? So it's an experience or like episode of experiences that kind of you can dial in on, like, how I remember. I always remember my friend's grandmother first, right? Like, I always think abuela is my friend's grandmother. But then what my brain automatically does is, now I've linked that word abuela to the feeling of cooking or sewing with love, right? Because that's what I think of when I think of grandmas, like in a worldly sense. So that's what you kind of want to do with words if you don't want to have to memorize them. And if you don't want to have to keep, like, translating in your head, you have to actually make real memories out of them. So that's what I was saying with tronco d'albero. So this tree trunk, right, is next to Dumbledore, and that's why I'm never gonna forget, because it was like, I remember the purple, I remember that I was teaching you tronco d'albero, but in English. And actually, I haven't really done, like, I haven't zoomed out with tronco d'albero, so I could do that with you right now. Let me think. So tree trunk, what does tree trunk remind me of? Let's see. Tree trunk. It's funny because I think of like I think of like hugging a tree, right? So like abrazando un árbol, something like that. But that's how I can. So now in my head, I will think like tronco d'albero next to Dumbledore, but then I'll also think of like the feeling of hugging a tree trunk, or you know when you hug a tree to climb a tree. So that would be like a really good way to anchor the word into your memory without having to memorize it. It's the basic gist. And so, I lost my red. No, did it break? Oh no. Okay. Yay, it didn't break. Okay, so let me go back to some of the vocabulary from the other page. So here we are, and this is like one of my favorite scenes from Harry Potter, where the letters are like scattered all over magically in the living room. So we can do this here with you right now. So you can learn the word letter. Right now I'm learning the word lettera, and what I actually have to do, like for pronunciation, what I do in my head is I actually so with Italian, the pronunciation is a little bit difficult for me because I can't remember like where to put emphasis on sometimes. And I know that that's exactly what it's like when you're learning English. It's very difficult to remember where the emphasis is on. So that's why you kind of have to like do the episodic anchoring, just so that you don't need to continually memorize like, oh, does it go here or there? Okay, so basically, lettera in Italian is one of those words that I have to remember. The E is emphasized in the beginning before the two T's. So the same thing in English, letter. And what I do for that is, like, I go through and I think, okay, letter. And I'll remember now that, so I'll associate letter with Hogwarts, right? Because Harry got a letter from Hogwarts. So, like, a una lettera de Hogwarts. And then what will happen is, so that's like a small, like, isolated incidence where I'm learning lettera. But now what I have to do is I need to expand that to encompass like all of the experience of what it feels like to receive a letter, or all the experience of what it feels like, you know, either to write a letter or receive a letter, or, you know, things like that. So I associate receiving a letter with a good, like, positive feeling. And so now I'll always remember lettera is, you do have to do like I guess a tiny bit of memorization when it comes to remembering like the pronunciation and matching it and anchoring it with like an episodic anchor. So like I'll repeat lettera, and I'll try to associate it with, like, I just tell my brain like I'm associating lettera with the feeling of receiving a letter, which is like a positive feeling, right? It's like, yay, somebody wrote me a letter. Like, and of all people, Harry must have been so excited, right? Because he was like trapped in in a little room with like nothing to do, you know. So he probably really was excited, of all people. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to go over with you when it comes to memorizing and things like that. I know this is plaid. They didn't really make his shirt plaid. That's alright though. I'll just go with it. Anyways, so I can go over some vocabulary with you. I wanted to do that as well. I know that the biggest part about learning English is actually the pronunciation. And so we already went over letter, which is like sobre or busta. And the letters, I was thinking the letters come out of the fireplace. So fireplace. It's kind of weird because fire, we kind of add a weird like Y in there. I think it's like because it's basically a connective Y, right? The intruding Y, because there's two, fi and then are two vowels. So you have to kind of say fire. So fireplace. And then we've got an uncle. You can do the same thing with, you know, all of the words like fireplace or uncle. So when you think of like uncles, I think of, so for Italian, for zio, I think of my friend's uncle because I, you know, met their Italian uncle. So I always think, okay, that's zio. Oops, sorry. And then you know, I can start to take that word, zio, and I can imagine, like, what does that mean, like, in a broader sense? Like, what is the feeling of having an uncle? And I think, like, for me, the first impression is usually, like, oh, uncles, they're, like, funny, and, like, I don't know, sometimes goofy, and they're kind of, like, you know, they get the bad rap of being, like, irresponsible or something like that, you know? So you can associate it with something like that. Although I don't know if an Italian zio is that irresponsible. It's probably quite different in that culture. Which is probably why I have waited. You know, sometimes I wait to actually experience what it's like to experience a uncle or whatever word in that culture, because that will help also anchor the word better for you. So like for abuela, I think in Spanish culture, I think in English culture, our grandmas definitely bake with love and sew and knit things with love. But I think in Spanish culture, it's even like more, you know? So it just seems more like embedded. And so I kind of wait to see, like, what is the experience a lot of Italians would have with the word zio. What is their experience with their own uncles, you know what I mean? So that I would wait, like, that's the other thing too. Learning a language can, like, take time when you want it to be part of you, instead of just memorizing. I mean, a lot of people learn a language in like 6 months from memorizing. You know, you just sit there and memorize constantly. But that was not my preferred method. So I didn't do that because my memory is, you know, not that great. I get kind of frustrated having to memorize words. So, yeah. You could go over, like, the words, like, you know, maybe, like, overwhelmed, like, sono sopraffatti dalle lettere. They are overwhelmed by letters. or están abrumados por las cartas. And what else? So Harry is happy. So Harry is happy is like está feliz or felice. And what else? He's also catching a letter. So he catches a flying letter, you could say. Harry ha atrapado una carta voladora, or Harry prende una lettera volante, I think. And that's basically it. Let me know if you have any questions, or if you want to correct my Italian, if there's anybody out there that knows Italian. Okay, yeah, that's it. I hope this helped, and I hope that you're able to kind of get the gist of what episodic learning is. Oh, I did want to go over one more thing with you. So, episodic learning is actually, like, it's sort of a part, it's not like an official part, it's sort of a part of comprehensible input. And I learned about comprehensible input through Stephen Krashen's video. I'll put the video here, and in the description I'll just put like the name of it so that you can look it up if you would like. It's a very old video though, and basically he just goes over what comprehensible input is, and that we as children learn easily, like easier from comprehensible input, because it's sort of like absorbing the language instead of like actively forcing yourself and memorizing and all of that. So basically, when I watched that video, that's when it kind of like came to my mind. For some reason, whatever he said in that video made me think like, oh, I need to start associating, like, I guess in my head I was saying, I started to think like, if I was a 3-year-old learning a language, then I really need to I need to cut out all of the words, all the memorization, none of that. I need to just take the word plainly and associate it with something that is relatable, right? Because that's what a child is doing, right? They just want to know, like, they remember a word because of how it relates to them. So, you know, I relate to the word abuela by thinking of my friend's grandmother, and then I relate to the word abuela as well because I think of Spanish culture, and abuelas, like, often we think of, like, just, you know, putting all their love into feeding their family or something. And so basically, episodic anchoring is like a form, just a small like branch or a form of comprehensible input. That was basically the thing I wanted to go over. So if you have any questions, let me know, any comments. And I hope you learned something. And I actually think I'm gonna go watch the first movie of Harry Potter now. Because I really love this scene. So, alright, that's it. Bye bye for now. Ciao, ciao.